Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on today's Beyond Maintenance. You might be expecting or used to seeing Madison on here. Unfortunately, she is stranded in Dallas after the Rent Manager User Conference and some unfortunate weather. So I'm Molly Spurlick. I'm one of the marketing coordinators here at MELD, and I'm going to be moderating today's panel. We're also waiting for our panelist to jump on. She was having a little bit of technical difficulties. So go ahead and drop in the chat where you guys are from. We'd love to see how many people we've got on here, and let us know if you're a customer or if you're just here hanging out to learn some stuff. I'm also joined by Luke. He's one of the members of our customer success team. So I'll let him introduce himself. And yeah, let us know where you guys are all from. Thanks for joining.
Hi guys, I'm Luke. I am MELD's fastest reader on the CSM team, and I love Property Meld.
Okay, it looks like our chat is disabled. So let me try.
The QA chat is disabled. Oh, we got Agua Calientes, Mexico. Nice and warm over there.
Sorry, guys. I'm just trying to figure out how to get this chat enabled. I have a member of the team coming up to help me right now. People are in the Q&A. Chat is disabled. Thanks, guys. We're working on getting that fixed. Sorry. Like I said, it's my first time here hosting one of these webinars.
Make it to see how the bread's made now.
Hi, MJ.
You got the chat for it?
No, this is the Q&A. I don't know.
Go in the chat there. Click on the actual logo. 3 dots there. And then everyone.
Okay.
Host and panelists can chat with it. There you go.
Thanks, MJ. Okay, guys, sorry about that. The chat, yay, the chat is working. So if you try to tell us where you guys were from and it didn't go through, let us know right now. Oklahoma, Denver, Colorado. Carrie, I was just in Denver for the Neighborly Conference. Oklahoma City, Pennsylvania, California, Florida, Atlanta. Oh my gosh, you guys are in so many warm places. I'm jealous.
We're supposed to get snow when, like an hour from now, maybe?
Yeah, New Jersey, Idaho, Canada, Mexico, Costa Rica. Oh my goodness, that's awesome. Well, thank you guys again for joining us. We should have our panelists hopping in soon, as well as John Kearns, our manager of solutions. So once they get in, we'll take a little break and let them introduce themselves. But let's just dive into it and we'll kind of give like a little overview of what we're talking about today. So obviously working in the property maintenance industry, we all know that one of the most difficult aspects of that is coordinating all of our key players, right? You have your residents, your vendors, your maintenance technicians, your property investors, and facilitating getting all of those people to communicate and engage can be really difficult. And one of the easiest ways that we can overcome this is setting really clear expectations with those key players about what you as, a maintenance coordinator or a property manager, what you expect. And so they know what's expected of them to make sure your process remains efficient. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about, what expectations you can set with your team and how to communicate those expectations. And I'd love to see you guys asking questions in the chat, or you can use the Q&A. That way, nothing gets missed. Sometimes that chat kind of blows up and it's hard to get to everything. But this is definitely, we want this to be very collaborative. We want to answer your guys' questions. So feel free to drop those as they come up. But Luke, since you are our only guy here right now, I'm going to put you on the spot for our first question. So why is it essential to set clear expectations in property maintenance?
Well, I think it really sets like the tone for what needs to happen. Without it, you really are just, it's the ingredients for a problem. Like there's no way you cannot expect something to go wrong if you don't set the standard at the beginning. Especially with, like, I know everyone thinks that their residents are very unique, but they're all very the same. And sometimes you assume that they have a higher common sensibility to effectively assume the same standards without communicating it. You'll realize that's not true.
Yeah.
Especially if they just came from a different property manager, they might have a completely different understanding of what's needed versus what you actually want from them.
So kind of going off of that specifically, like as we're talking about residents, what are some of the expectations you think it's important to set with your residents upfront? You know, whether you're implementing a new maintenance process or whether you have new residents coming on, like what are some of those expectations specifically related to like how you expect them to communicate and engage with you that you should set right away from the beginning?
I think almost everyone in the chat's going to agree with me that at least starting the standard of getting as much information as you can in that first conversation is huge, or else you're just going to have to reply back and ask for more information. Like you're already just adding a step. If they don't know, hey, I need as much as possible first, it'd be great. But also just clear communication. Like if I just get a picture of a problem, but I don't know what's happening, I don't know what's happening.
So when you mean like at the very beginning, do you mean at the very beginning of like the maintenance request when they're submitting a maintenance request, like making sure like you've set those expectations for what you expect as far as like a description and pictures and all of that?
Yeah. So I actually had a customer who showed me one of their maintenance requests yesterday, and it was a resident who just posted a picture of their feet in water, and that was it. And they didn't know what they wanted. Like they understood there was a problem and a leak, but there was no information past that point. So you're just like, great, I'm going to just assume you need help.
So Stephanie just dropped in the chat. I just need tenants to go through the proper channels to submit requests. So that's definitely something we hear a lot. And, you know, like you have some people emailing you, you have some people using your portal, you have some people calling, you have some people stopping in your office. Luke, as a customer success manager, I mean, you help a lot of people in their onboarding process. What do you think are some of the best ways that you can educate your residents on what those channels are and how to use them?
I think the speed of repair, just the speed of being able to do it right, going through the proper channels is all that needs to be set. Like, hey, I can address this, I can fix this, but it's going in the back burner. Like maybe I will look at my email, maybe, or maybe I'll remember the sticky note I have on my desk. But if it's in the right place at the first time, then it's already being done out of my hands. It's being taken care of.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, like we've had, hi, John.
Hi.
So John is our head of solutions here. John, I'll let you introduce yourself. We're just kind of jumping in.
All right. Sorry for being tardy. Got hung up there a little bit, but yeah, no, my name is John Kearns, head of solutions here at Property Meld. Been, for those that don't know me, been here about a little over 4 years, and maintenance is, I just like having fun with maintenance, guys. That's what it's all about.
So we were just talking about what expectations you can set with your residents regarding like what you expect as far as their communication and engagement with property maintenance. And Stephanie in the chat, she said, I just need my tenants to go through the proper channels to submit requests. And I think there's a lot of unique things you can do there. Like I know whether you're using Property Meld or another sort of online maintenance software, a unique thing a lot of our customers have done is printed like magnets that they've stuck on the fridge or on the stove that directs people like, hey, this is what you do when you need to submit a maintenance request. And I think that's really helped them like find some creative ways to get more of their residents to use whatever channel they prefer. I think that's super important.
Absolutely.
So going off of the resident path, so what are some of the expectations you should set with your investors regarding maintenance communication, and kind of how can you set those expectations from the very beginning of your relationship with them to, avoid problems later on?
Absolutely. I mean, residents should be easy, right? It's like my kid. If I just let him go to the cookie jar and eat an unlimited amount of Oreos, he's going to continue to do it, right? Now, if he gets in trouble for doing it, guess what? He stops going to the cookie jar unless he asks for permission. Residents are kind of the same way, and I know there's always some uneasiness when it's making process changes for residents, but really it starting with residents, it comes down to the transparency. Why are we doing this? And that parlays perfectly into, it's the exact same thing with your owners and investors. Setting the right expectation with owners and investors is vital for your sanity moving forward. If you don't, typically it's a nightmare. And setting the right expectation is, what can they expect? How often can they expect it? And if they don't like it, go somewhere else. It's never the case, right? But it's an overarching 78% of all owners and investors, specifically your onesie twosie, what I'll call your accidental landlords. 78% of owners and investors say maintenance is what on their investment properties what keeps them up at night. Just be transparent with them. And specifically with Property Meld, like that's why Owner Hub even came into existence, is being able to deliver the right amount of transparency to your owners and investors, because too much can overwhelm it. But the right amount of transparency also validates what you do on a day-to-day basis, right? Like you should let them see that some of these residents can be a real big pain in the butt, and you're handling that for them, and also handling their investment, and also knowing that, hey, at the end of the year, I'm going to be able to show you through insights with Property Meld, no plug or anything like that, but what your average maintenance spend per unit was, where are we at? Are we driving down costs? Are costs going up? But being able to be transparent with where everything's at. But it starts with the right expectation up front. You got to document it. Like having a very transparent, crystal clear client agreement is vital.
So I have a follow-up question to that, John. We all hear it. One of the most difficult or time-consuming aspects of the maintenance process is getting those investor approvals in a timely manner. What can people do, or what can people say to their owners and investors, to really set that importance of how quickly we need you to get these to us, whether it's through a portal, whether it's through email, whatever channel you're using, how can you stress the importance of getting those approvals back in a timely manner? And if anyone in the chat has any advice on how they do this, we'd love to hear it as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, please, everybody chime in. Speed of repair, right? If anybody's been on a meeting or a demo with me that's on here, I beat the drum. Speed of repair has a direct correlation to your resident satisfaction. Resident satisfaction has a direct correlation to resident retention. The number one reason why residents don't renew their lease, and it's been like this for years, is maintenance or lack of communication, engagement, right? They don't feel like they're being taken care of, and it's typically maintenance related in some capacity. Owners, it's a fickle mistress, but they need to understand the importance of that speed of repair. Like, it's your reputation on the line, right? Setting maintenance limit amounts so you can get smaller repairs done without approval, huge. Like, I had a meeting with a company yesterday. They're drowning. They have a $250 maintenance limit. what in the world can you fix for $250 in today's world? They're having to go get owner approvals for literally every single thing. That will fracture at some point in time. So again, it goes back to setting that realistic expectation with that owner that like it sub 500, we're going for broke, right? Like we're gonna fix it, but more than $500, which isn't much in today's world, you got to do it. And Nathan, exactly $500. So, but yeah, is it, is it affecting the like there's also violations and things like that you just kind of have to go do if you don't get an owner approval in a timely manner, because yeah, in Rapid City, South Dakota, when it's January and it's -5 out, if the furnace goes out, I don't have an hour to wait for an owner approval. I got to get my HVAC guy over there to fix that thing, right? But it's also protecting their investment. So pipes don't freeze. So, and there's always like that, but owner approval, I was just looking at average owner approval time in some insights. And right now I think the average is 8.8 hours. What the insights data is showing us. So you can't necessarily require it, but getting as many of your owners to opt into texting as possible. Now you're talking minutes, not hours. Like, just, can I send you a text message to let you know? They can click a link, boom, and they're off to the races.
So Morgan just asked a great question. What do you emphasize to owners when units are vacant and you're waiting on approvals for turnovers? And that's a great point, because where's that urgency? If you don't have a resident that's waiting on something, how do you emphasize the importance of that?
I guess I'll ask a question to everybody here. So how many, sorry, I just saw text messages are the best. Unfortunately, Meld, so not allowed to send direct messages to them. Okay, there's a workaround there. They have to opt into texting through, so it does take a little bit of legwork. I want to be very crystal clear here, but it's worth it. You get them to opt in on their account, and I'd walk them through it when you onboard a new owner every single time, because then once they opt in, they're good, and then you can actually send text messages. They just typically it's unknown, they just don't know where to go. So I'm sorry, ask the question again, Molly.
No problem. She asked, how can I create that urgency for owners to approve turnover costs? So there's not a resident in there, it's not affecting that, but how can you still create that urgency?
So the question I was going to ask is, has anybody, sorry, I got to stand up, I've been sitting too long here, guys, but has anybody put a dollar amount to every day that a property sits vacant? It's costing you money because you're not collecting rent on it, right? But it's also costing that owner and investor money. My favorite little trick is put a number on it. Like, every day that this sits vacant costs you X amount of dollars. So when I come to you for an approval on an estimate, like, time is money. And I think anytime you can do that psychological switch ultimately ends up happening. That's my favorite. I don't know is there anybody out there that does that? I guess I'll ask that question. Actually put a dollar amount to what it costs to stay vacant.
Yeah, Rebecca said in the chat that we set up workflows to get vendors, tenants, and owners to opt into texting on the first few mails. That's awesome.
100%.
Okay, so we kind of talked about, owners and investors. I want to talk about next, like, the difference between setting expectations with your vendors versus your internal text. Because I think we see it's a little bit easier to set those expectations with your technicians, because obviously they're hired by your company, you pay their salary. So it's a little bit easier to have more control over that situation. What are some of the expectations you should set with your vendors, specifically, again, regarding how much engagement you expect from them, and how can you kind of follow up on that when they are third party working with different companies with different
Mhm.
expectations, things like that.
Luke, I'll defer to you on this one. Luke,
Great.
you're in it every day, right? Like
So
this
I would
is,
say my bread and butter lately has been looking at Insights Pro and actually looking at just the maintenance spend per vendor. If I'm paying my HVAC vendor 90 grand and they won't even just send me an invoice, why? If it was 300 bucks, cool, I get it. You didn't click. That's fine. Maybe you made a mistake.
Mhm.
Or if I'm looking at just the work orders in general, if you're giving me 5 stars every week when I use you and you're a plumber or an HVAC, I might not care. I might forget that. But if you're just giving me bare bones and I'm paying you more than I pay for my car, I've got a problem.
Mike says, Luke, my man, boom.
So just
So,
Mic drop, right?
good job.
so
But
what
no, I
about,
think the concern too is it depends, every market is different, but there's a pretty overarching, I can venture to guess there's not a market out there that, vendors are hard to find, right? Good vendors for sure. So there's always that perception that I don't want to ruffle any feathers. And I think something that I've watched Luke do a very, very good job with in onboarding new customers is it again setting that right expectation, like you said, Molly. It's also setting the expectation that, hey, are we asking you to use a whole nother system? Not exactly. Are we asking you to do more work to do work for our property management company? No, we're not. We're actually going to make it easier for you. And here's why. And once they see it, that's when we see vendor adoption go through the roof, right? It's very polarizing. If you look at our net in-app vendor net promoter score. So there's over 50,000 vendors active in the system, right, Luke? Now, so it's a big data set that we're looking at this with, and I think net promoter scores I think it's right on 40, or it was. I haven't looked at it in a while, but it's never so. Scale of 1 to 10. How do you like using Property Meld? It's rarely a 5 or a 6. It's either a 10 or it's a 0. It is by far and away the most polarizing net promoter score that we have. And it's because, and I can always tell if they're a 10, the right expectation was set and the right conversation was had. If it's a 0, it probably wasn't. And again, same thing that you're doing with your residents, the same thing that you're doing with your owners. You got to do the same thing with your vendors, because again, it's your reputation on the line. The vendor can go jack something up beyond all recognition and upset a resident and an investor. It's not their fault, it's yours, right? You hired them. And so making sure that, hey, the reason why we're doing this is CYA, first and foremost, for you and for me, but also to deliver a better experience for you, right? Getting you more information to be able to go do the work. And once that kind of clicks, that like you don't need a PhD in computer programming to operate Property Meld. It is as simplistic as we can possibly make it, and we do that for a reason, right? And I agree, Mike. It's an absolute must. I think even one to one, like everybody's got their top 10 vendors, right? And some less, some slightly more. You buy them lunch, because again, it's a relationship that you need to build. Because
Becca said in the chat, she said, good vendor relationships make the biggest difference.
buy them lunch, bring them in, let Luke or one of our rock stars on the success team give a 30-minute tutorial as to why they want to use it and the benefits behind it. And then usually from there forth, it's usually off to the races, you guys.
And I think that's true even if you're not using a system like Property Meld, right? Like whatever way you conduct your maintenance process, bring those vendors in, like John said, buy them lunch, show them a video, and really set those expectations early on so that, there's not that confusion back and forth. Linda just dropped
address
in.
Linda's thing
Oh,
real quick.
sorry, Luke.
No,
Go
you're
ahead.
good. Linda, I was just going to reply back and say, like, 100% agree. Like, they are external to you, but if they're getting you good reviews, if they're bringing marketing material to you, that's your brand. Like, yes, if they're doing bad, they're bad. But if I'm getting fives, I'm giving them beer. I'm keeping them happy. I'm going to make sure they know I'm going to give them more work, maybe give them preventative maintenance. Like, I will reward good vendors. And I don't really want to give work to vendors who I'm doing more work for, kind of deal.
Yeah, it's a great point. Linda just said, we build vendor relationships by leaving Google reviews for the vendors that we used, and they tend to be appreciative of that and want to work with us. We ask that they also leave a review for us as well. It's a win-win for all. I think that's a great point. And like Mike said too, like onboarding your vendors and training them is a must. And if you can kind of throw in like that, hey, quid pro quo, you leave us 5-star, we'll leave you a 5-star. That's a really great point, Linda. Rebecca
Somebody
said-
I've worked with over the years too, they do they do their holiday party for the office and things like that, but in the same time of year, because things tend to slow down around the holiday season, aside from emergencies, but they have a vendor appreciation party every year. They have all their vendors come in and they wine them and dine them a little bit, right? And I was like, wow, that's really neat that you do that. And what Mike told me was, he goes, because then when I'm in a pinch and my coordinator needs something like tomorrow, I need a favor a little bit. He goes, they're always willing to answer the phone and they love it. They love us. And so again, relationship building, right? It's 100% a relationship, whether they don't work for you, but they work for you in a sense. So.
Yeah, Rebecca said, the maintenance coordinator should always call and introduce themselves to new vendors. We think picking up the phone always helps stay connected versus sending a text. Show them appreciation, respect their time, and they respect yours. Yeah, great points, all great points. Samuel, back to owner approval for turns. We get approval for the whole turn list, not the price. Punch list approval from vendors and the price is what it is. Getting on the market ASAP is worth way more than saving a couple $100. So you're not asking specifically for a price, you're just giving them the list of maintenance tasks that need to be done and say, hey, we need approval. So that's a good way to do it too.
Yep. No, and that's where marking up maintenance, boy, it's a polarizing conversation sometimes. Some do it, some don't, right? But if you are doing it, you've got a punch list that's 15 items long, right? And if you're sending a general quote to the owner for approval ASAP, it's like, hey, this is going to cost you, we're doing a mini reno, it's going to be $5,500, whatever it is, right? It just round number, but it gives you the ability to kind of to tweak in there. Maybe the painting was supposed to be $1,000 and came in at 800. Now we can start adjusting cost and price there, and help increase, turnovers suck for everybody. Can we recoup some costs on our end as the property management company? So
I just want to go in there. I think another thing to note in that is once you do that transfer between vendor and tech, like just internal and external, that's when you can really tweak that. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing my electrical on this renovation, but I can do the drywall, I can do the painting, I can do the everything miss that. So I can at least maybe save that for the owner, and they're seeing the value in me being able to save them money, even if it's not marking up because it's already in house.
Right.
I already got you guys in that house all day. It's gonna be a week as long as I get my vendors there quickly. And then that's them not having to do all of that work and being like, hey, I'd have to find 9 different vendors for this myself, or you do it all for me.
The other thing too, is a trend that I'm seeing, is especially in turnovers when timing is of the essence here. And we've already got one bottleneck, and the perception is if I hire an internal technician or a technician team for that matter, like everything needs to go to them. But that's not always necessarily the case. And so back to my point about putting a number on how much it cost, like, all right, so I can outsource a turnover for the most 90% of a turnover and shave 4 days off a turn versus my net here for my owner and investor, they're netting out in the positive here, right? And so thinking in that mindset too is it's not always the best to, if I have to extend a turnover by 5 days because my internal team's just strapped, it ends up costing more money in the long run, right? Let's use them for our occupieds, and then let's focus on kind of keeping turns somewhat separate. And it's like, all right, how do we go the fastest? Like, speed is of the utmost importance.
So Stephanie asked in the chat, how do you guys require all vendors to use Property Meld? I have some that are larger that don't necessarily need us. They don't want to use Meld because it's outside of how they do business.
I think that goes back to exactly what we've been talking this whole time, is just setting that expectation. Like, hey, I'm using Meld for maintenance. If they can somehow do 3 other softwares for you, if they know how to do their own billing, I don't know how asking them to do 12 clicks, maybe 21, if you do every click possible as a vendor, is any different. Like, their kids playing on Netflix. It's not like we're in a non-digital age. Everything's online. They should be, unless they're looking to write on a piece of paper everything, it's going to be rough.
I heard, I was talking to Jen Stoops from Pure Property Management, and she said something that was like super, I thought, a really kind of just great way of describing kind of what you just said, Luke. She's like, most of your vendors, they're already texting or calling you. They're already communicating with the resident to schedule work. They're already, submitting invoices in some way, whether it's via email or through a portal, or, they drop it off at your office. Everything that they are doing already is what they're going to be doing inside Property Meld. You're just consolidating it into one platform. So like, you're really not giving them any more work. You're giving them one easy way to do all the work that they're already doing.
Typically, I guess here's a question for everybody too, is the larger who's doing vendor agreements? I guess that's first and foremost, is how many people do vendor agreements? Like, and I know we can't necessarily know exactly, but yeah, the vendor packet. I love that, Mike. And it's like, vendor agreements, the bigger the vendor, the more vital I think vendor agreements become. Like, your one-man handyman, Floyd's 71 years old and he's super cheap and he's not gonna do anything but drop off an invoice. That's fine. You think of it like the 80-20 rule, right? If I can get 80% buy-in, we're winning. And typically you can get more than that. But that a vendor packet, a vendor agreement, and it's like, hey, we're gonna ask you to do this, but then you're a preferred vendor, right? It's gives and gets, right? I need you to give me this, but what are they going to get in return? Guaranteed work. Do they need guaranteed work? No, right? But it's also like, hey, especially the bigger ones, it's a lot easier to have that conversation, the CYA conversation. Like, residents suck sometimes, and nobody likes to go into litigation. It happens, but we have to have that documentation, and that's why we ask you to do this, because we are running third party, and having that in your vendor agreement, I think, is vital.
Yeah, I love all this collaboration in the chat. I desperately need a vendor packet. We use one. What's a good vendor packet you guys utilize? Vendor agreements and vendor training, even if it's on Zoom or sending them links to training videos. Mario, like you mentioned, you'd like to hear how, as a new user of Property Meld, what would be a good way to get everyone on board? I think kind of going back to what John said, invite your vendors into the office one day and buy them lunch and have a sit down, whether it's, scheduling 10-minute one-on-ones with each of your vendors or doing a Zoom training, things like that. At the end of the chat as well, I don't know so if everyone's aware, a newer thing that we've just rolled out is our Meld Academy, where we have vendor trainings. So you can invite all your vendors to that. One of our CSMs, like Luke or someone else on his team, will be on that call and kind of walk them through how vendors can use Meld more efficiently. So invite them to lunch or send them a gift card to get DoorDash and invite them to Meld Academy. And again, I
Absolutely.
think that's true for whatever system you're using, even if it's not Property Meld. Just we said, it's all about going back to building those relationships and giving them a little something to get a little something.
I think it's also just the way we're trending currently into tech. Like, I'm not gonna ask them if they have insurance. I'm just gonna assume that they have insurance, or I'm not gonna now demand photos. Like, I'm just gonna assume that's the standard. Is I should have a photo of what's being done. Like, it's not a hard ask to say I need an invoice, I need a picture, I need some participation online somewhere.
Mhm.
It's just going to be in one place now instead of all over the place.
For anyone interested, I know we kind of got a lot of people talking about, vendor training, implementing, getting them on board. John Martin just dropped in the chat the link to the next Meld Vendor Academy. It looks like it's going to be November 14th. So Rebecca had said we just started using Meld just over a year ago, and we received a lot less pushback from tenants and vendors than expected. That's great, Rebecca. We love to hear that.
Yeah.
And again, it just all goes back to just education and being transparent. And once they see the benefits, it's pretty easy from there.
No, it's funny. In all the years of Property Meld, I've never once had anybody tell me like, yep, Property Meld doesn't work because residents won't use it. Every time we have a sit down conversation with them, if we ever hear that objection, it's because they're not setting the proper expectation. Well, everybody's still calling again, hand in the cookie jar because you let them. And setting, it sounds like, Rebecca, you set the right expectations up front, right? Resident benefits packages are huge, and as you're onboarding residents, it's setting that right expectation, because the number one thing is engagement and that communication. And if they know that that's where they're going to get it, that's where they're going to go. And just setting it right there.
I just called a customer the other day, and her voicemail said, "Hey, you've reached the voicemail of so-and-so. If this is a maintenance request, go to Property Meld and submit it." So even just small things like that are such a great way to continue to drive those expectations home. So,
yep.
I
okay.
actually add
Oh, go
into,
ahead, Luke.
I'm giving that vendor training, so lower your expectations. I've also been translating literally the whole vendor experience into Spanish. Like, I've been trying to get my head in the mind of a vendor. It's not hard in any language. I've walked it through on both sides. It's pretty easy. Not asking a lot.
Mike just said, tenants are not allowed to call vendors. They don't even have their phone number. You must go into Meld and put in your request. Again, it's almost like, I don't want to use the word force, but it's like, if you force someone to do something a new way, they're going to do it that way and see the benefits. So this is a question that I have that I think, could be a little crunchy, because of course, we talk about, like Stephanie said, if you have vendors that don't necessarily need your business, like, how can you set these expectations without, losing vendors that you need or losing investors? So what should property managers do when these expectations are not being met? And again, that's kind of a fine line, because of course you don't want to lose these vendors and these investors, but how can you communicate, hey, you're not abiding by the standard of service we've implicated?
I think I got one, if I'm not cutting anyone off. But I think a great thing to do would just be having more like information for your vendors, like showing them the insights data and be like, hey, in Meld, this is what I'm saying. You're expensing this much. You're getting me this many reviews. I'm giving you this much work. Do you want more work? Because I need one of these two numbers to increase. If that happens, we're good. We're golden. But just letting them know, like, hey, I can see what's going on in maintenance better now than I could before. So now I have maybe higher expectations than I did previously.
Gives and gets, right? Like, what are they going to get out of using Property Meld? If they're going to give you that, what do they get in return? Is it, you know, X number of guaranteed, work orders a month? Is it a year? Is it a dollar amount? What is it? There's there's bad vendors, and the fear of losing a vendor is real, right? Like it's not like it was a few years ago when vendors really kind of were foaming at the mouth to do work for property management companies because it's guaranteed income. They have more work than they know what to do with now. I mean, I just heard of even locally in Podunk, Rapid City, South Dakota, there's a plumbing and HVAC company that has now they're up to a 3-hour minimum, like because they can. And so that's hard. So what are they getting in return? Can you put a dollar amount on it? The larger the organization, the harder that becomes, right? But then I love the idea of like, hey, you give us every time we get a 5-star review for the work that you do, we're going to make sure that we give that to you, but I need you to go through the proper channels to do so, right? To Luke's point, we can give you data on how fast your guys are getting things done that they probably don't do or don't have. We don't know, right? Like it's finding those tricks of what can I give them in return to get buy-in to do it our way, right? That's what it comes down to. Is property mail ultimately becomes your process, and you're just getting vendors, residents, owners, all of them to buy into your process. That's what it comes down to.
I think it's also the same way you'd be talking to a vendor about buying another tool, though. Like, if I want you to move from Milwaukee to DeWalt because it's cheaper, cool. Like, that's still a conversation. It's however you're going to market what's changing for them. The tool is going to be the same. They're always going to have to be giving you an invoice. They're always going to give you the same end result. You're just asking them to do it with a different color, a different flair by using Meld. Like, it's not something that anyone else outside of any maintenance software at all would not expect.
Sorry, I keep muting and unmuting myself. A water line broke outside the building today, so we've got a whole construction team drilling into the ground. So I hope it's not too loud for you guys. John Martin just dropped in the chat a downloadable 1-page kind of resource that can be included in your resident move-in packages that kind of talk about property meld and how they can get on board with that. So another great resource. And I love all this talk about a vendor packet. I'm in marketing, so I'm like, ooh, the wheels are turning. Keith Small, we only have one vendor who refuses to use Meld. They understand that they are not a priority one vendor and that the only reason we use them is we really need their help or for after hours. They also understand that at some point we may no longer need them if they continue to not use Meld. I think that's such an awesome point, right? Like the more work you want to get, then use these processes we've put in place.
I also don't want to be that guy, but I know everyone's always going to be thinking, when is the time to move into text? And if I'm having issues finding vendors, I'm having an issue finding text. I'm not the one to say you could poach your vendor, but with the data you have, you go, hey, I don't want to buy my plumber if they're giving me nothing already. But if I've got someone who's consistently giving me good reviews, consistently giving me all my invoices, replying to me on time, I will not be as hard pressed to offer them a job on my team if I wanted to go that route.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mike just said at the summit, they mentioned it's not reinventing the wheel, it's making the wheel function. Boom. I love that. I don't know who said that, but whoever did, they're very smart. Melissa said the same with us. If they don't want to use Meld, we don't use them, even the hard to acquire specialties. Okay, awesome. So, and this is kind of a question for the group as well as it is for John and Luke. But what are some of the tools you've used to enhance communication and expectation setting? And whether, of course, that's property meld or something else, but what are some of the ways that you can enhance that engagement?
Luke, what do you see?
Well, I think it's just a lot of being able to know that you're getting heard. Like even just on my iPhone, if I'm looking at my read receipt, so I know someone saw this, That means a lot more to me if I'm just at least talking to someone but getting no reply than just guessing that they saw it and hoping that they saw it. It's the same way, like if I'm getting a voicemail, like if I'm just shouting out into the void to anyone, regardless if they're a resident, an owner, a tech, a vendor, and I don't know what's happening,
Mhm.
I don't feel like I'm doing anything right. And I can't tell that I am. Like, and everything you need to be able to do some sort of performance tracking, or you can't improve your performance and you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah, it's so you're in overview. So even if you don't have Insights Pro, you have overview on Insights. One of my favorite stats in there is communication. I forget exactly what it's called. Luke, help me out here.
Engagement.
Number of chats, engagement. Thank you. Number of chats. So what our team, the nerds, found out for me, because I don't know how to do this stuff, but no, in all seriousness, if you're between 5 and 10 chats per meld or engagement, that's a pretty healthy spot to live. So it's kind of that's kind of should be your blinking indicator. If it goes below 5, you're picking up the phone too much. If you go more than 10, either A, you're not getting responses, so something's broken there, but think of it kind of like that blinking red light to let you know that there's something you need to dive into from the low end to the high end. But that's kind of that one sweet spot of data that you can kind of say, oh yeah, we're 6.5 or we're 7.5, whatever. Like it's a really neat way for you to just at a glance know if you've got something that needs your attention or not. If you're hovering between 5 and 8, rock on.
Yeah, Rebecca said workflows. So asking for photos, troubleshooting tips. Workflows help us communicate more efficiently with tenants, owners, and vendors. So Melissa, she said, I set deadlines and then message via the chat tab to ensure they know there is a deadline. If I receive a not accepted message, I immediately reassign to a different vendor. So those are all really great ways.
Nope, I love it. Right. And Rebecca, absolutely, workflows. My favorite line at the maintenance summit that we were just talking about was, if I took workflows away from my team right now, there'd be a mutiny. Justin, and he was probably one of the most reluctant people to adopt workflows, and don't get me on the soapbox of workflows, man, because in the world of AI and all of these buzzwords and everything like that, maintenance is not linear. And do we utilize AI on the back end of our system? Absolutely. Can you do things? But the financial impact that maintenance has on your guys' business is so monumental. Like next to leasing, there is no larger financial impact, right? So, and when engagements are fundamental baseline, it's like food and water for the health of our maintenance department. Like just kind of knowing and understanding where it is, but then being able to workflow as much as you can, and it takes it off. It takes the stress off of the pressure that is coordinating maintenance for you and your team.
MJ just dropped in the chat. MJ, John Martin, we've got a lot of Johns, so he's now designated the name MJ, but he has a resource created for vendors who refuse to use Meld. It's not online anywhere, but taking a facilitator approach is also an option. So you can assign melds to an internal user and have that user process the melds as needed. Schedule the meld so the resident is notified, chat with the resident and track the meld on the dashboard for clarity, and then close out the meld so it is tracked towards your speed of repair. Attach the invoice the vendor submits and approves it so that it will push to your accounting software for your accounting team. So obviously that's not the best way, and it creates a lot more work for your team. But if that's really something that you're struggling with and you absolutely can't lose this vendor, but they don't want to use Meld, you can take that facilitator approach. And if that's something that you're interested in, definitely reach out to your CSM and we can we
Mhm.
can get you that resource. So Stephanie said, at our next vendor appreciation meet, we are going to introduce our work order levels and start communicating these on the request template so they understand the urgency. We will also talk more about our core focus and values and send them end of the quarter reports on how many work orders were completed on time and any good comments we may receive from tenants, etc.
Oh, that's
Love that.
awesome.
Yeah.
Goes back to my gives and gets, right? Like you're giving them something, it's huge. And then Rebecca, you're dropping knowledge bombs, right? Like exactly. You need to know when it requires human to human engagement. And I think that's the vitality of maintenance coordination. Can we automate leasing? Probably quite a bit. I mean, there's a lot of AI tools out there from the leasing. We know what paths we're going down, right? But when you're talking about the language sets that these AI platforms have to build off of, like if you take ChatGPT, for instance, right? It's the language set that it's building off of is unfathomable, like the data that it can pull from and learn from. Property management as a industry is somewhat novel. There's not a lot of data out there. Property Meld arguably has by far and away the largest data set, and we don't even have like a fraction of enough to make it make sense. You got to have, it's AI assisted human decision making, like a human's got to touch it at some point. Like I even tread lightly when I talk with people about there's a workflow that you can auto assign things. Maybe I'm a control freak, but I want somebody on my team's eyes on that before I assign it, because you never know. My house is on fire. Is it? Or did you just turn on your furnace for the first time this fall and it has that smoky smell, right? So those kinds of things, right?
Awesome. So we've got about 5 minutes left. And so we do have a couple housekeeping things that I want to share with you guys. But does anyone have in the chat or Q&A, does anyone have any last minute, questions, comments you're dying to have answered before we pop off here? Mario, it was called to my attention recently that property management is a human personal work, and we do need to keep it as personal as possible. That's such an awesome point. And I love that, with Property Meld, you can customize some of those automated messaging. So even though you're automating it, it's still coming from you and it's personal. Mike, in the maintenance side, we get to see who's the preferred vendor, who goes to that area. Do they charge a trip charge? Can it be troubleshooted prior and maximizing the tools? It's human interaction.
Yep. Love it.
Awesome. So I just wanted to share a little bit about next month's Beyond Maintenance. And again, I apologize that we didn't have an industry panelist with us today. We usually try to have someone in there, so it's not just all of us chatting with you, but we had some technical difficulties. So next month on Wednesday, November 29th, so it's going to be a little later because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we're going to be discussing industry benchmarking in Beyond Maintenance. So specifically why it's crucial to benchmark your maintenance metrics against other in the industry, how you can identify trends, areas of improvement, and we'll also be sharing some benchmark data pulled from Property Meld. So if you're not yet using Property Meld and you kind of want to learn more about, sorry, shameless plug, about some of the things we were talking about today, Liz just dropped a link in the chat, and you can schedule a demo with someone on John's team. And then as well, if you are already a customer and you want to learn a little bit more about Insights Pro that we were talking about today, you can use that same link Liz dropped in the chat and schedule a time to meet with your customer success manager. But I really appreciate everyone jumping on with us today. Again, I apologize for the technical difficulties, but we hope to see you guys next month on Wednesday, November 29th. We'll also be sending out a recording of this webinar. So if you had any team members that couldn't make it, feel free to share that with them as well. But thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Thursday and have a good Halloween and try and stay warm. I guess maybe that doesn't apply to everyone in Mexico and Puerto Rico, but we'll try to stay warm here.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Hi, guys.